Robert, I'm the heckler in the front row. So what I so rudely interrupted John during was to let you know that these bracelets are out there, and this is so you can pray for individuals on the trip. But let me encourage you, don't pray for someone that is in your family or you know. Take someone you don't know, and just be praying for them, and it's a witness to those who even say, why are you wearing this? And you can just share, I'm praying for so-and-so as they're out. They leave at, I think it's like 5 a.m., 5:30 next Sunday, so that's why we commissioned them out today. But I want to encourage you to find now one of these black Bibles in the chairs in front of you, behind you, around you, side of you, somewhere. Find one of these Bibles. It's yours to take. It's also yours to give away. We love putting these in the hands of individuals. And we're on this journey through the book of Genesis, which is the first book in the Bible. Today we're going to get through Genesis 40 and 41, two different chapters. And as we do that, you can say to someone in a few weeks, I have gone through the entire book of Genesis. How cool is that? And you can also say, and it wasn't just about creation. There was so much more that was in this story. And we're following this story of Joseph in particular. And as we follow Joseph, last week, if you recall, he was put in prison for doing something that honored God. He was withstanding the temptation of Potiphar's wife. And as we saw, he was the first streaker in all of the Bible. There are multiple streakers, believe it or not, in the Bible. And he actually went and fled this temptation, but she grabbed his cloak and she said, look what he did. And she made a lie. And what happened? He got put in the prison for doing something that was trying to obey and honor God. And so here he is in this prison. And it made me think a lot about what do we do in these circumstances. There's a lot of different things that we go through. But it's not just the highs and lows that we have to focus on. It's life itself. In the past few weeks, God has just really had a lot of things happening in my life that have caused me to sit and reflect on what is the end goal of life. Yesterday morning, my grandfather, who is 92, breathed his last breath on this side of heaven, and he got to enter into glory. And while there is so much celebration in that, there's also sadness and there's reflection, but there's also asking the question, what is life about? Because when someone close to us passes, it causes us to stop, to pause, and ask, what am I doing with my life? What am I doing with the breath and the day that the Lord has given me? It was in the 1600s, 1643 to 1648, that over 100 ministers, 30 parliamentarians, 6 Scottish Presbyterian delegates came together and assembled what's known as the Westminster Catechism. This is kind of one of those, you hear different faiths and denominations have different catechists or different catechisms. Some of you, if you had a Catholic background, went through catechism class or Lutheran, or there's some different churches. Specifically in the Reformed and Presbyterian, there's this Westminster Catechism that they often go by. But what I love about it isn't necessarily to say, oh, we've got to follow this catechism, but the first question of all the things they have to wrestle with. Think about this. There are over 100 pastors. There are 30 parliamentarians. There are 6 Scottish Presbyterian delegates. Very important for some reason. And they come up with this question, and here it is. What is the chief end of man? In other words, what is the goal of existing? Why do you live? And what's the conclusion? Man's chief end is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. Our purpose, our calling, our reason for existing is so that we can glorify God not just today, but tomorrow and into eternity. We can glorify Him forever. And while we may have many catechisms and denominations that were formed since then, I believe the answer to this question is so critically important to how you go about life. I believe this should guide the way we go about our day-to-day interactions. It should guide the way we interact with others or the way we treat others, asking ourselves, what is my purpose in life? Well, Joseph, all the way back in the book of Genesis, had to wrestle with this. And I don't think he necessarily was wrestling with the question as much as he was living out the answer. And so I want to encourage you to go to Genesis chapter 40, and we're going to start in verse 1. And as we go through it, I'm just going to let you know we're kind of going high level. Genesis 40 and 41, we're going to skim over things. We're going to dive into some other things. And it says this, what are the first three words? Sometime later. Come on, you can say it out loud. I know the rain's going to distract you. So what? Sometime later. All right, sometime later. We read these words, and sometimes we're just like, okay, that's cute. But think about it. This is time passing by. Let me give you a little example of what we know of Joseph. Joseph was 17 years old when he was sold by his brothers as a slave. He wasn't very young. He wasn't very old. He was like the mid-age for being sold as a slave. And so he was sold at market value at 17 years old. We know from Genesis chapter 41, the events that are going to take place, that he is 30 years old at the time. So we know when this is taking place, he is about 28 years old. Why does this matter? Because from the time he was sold as a slave at 17 until this moment in this text, sometime later, he's either been a slave or a prisoner. 11 years as a slave or a prisoner. Can you imagine going over a decade for serving the Lord, honoring the Lord, and you've been suffering because of it? I can't imagine what was going through his mind. So as he's there, we see that he's finding opportunities. If it's in Potiphar's house, if it's in prison, everything he touches seems to be succeeding because he's honoring and glorifying God in everything he does. It's like the song that we sang before we had the commissioning of those students. It's, I will magnify the Lord. Everything we do should magnify the Lord. One of my favorite psalms is Psalm 34, verse 1. It says this, I will praise the Lord at all times, and I will constantly speak his praises. What we see in Joseph as we dig in is no matter his circumstance, whether high or low, he praises the Lord in it. And this is really the first point, if you want to use that term that is so critical to our understanding and setting up this text, is that glorifying God isn't dependent on your current circumstances. Glorifying God doesn't depend on how good things are going or how bad things are going. In all circumstances, in all things, we can praise the Lord. And Joseph gives us this beautiful Old Testament Genesis example of how in the good times and the bad times he brings praise to the Lord. So what does that look like? What does it look like for you and I to live our life praising the Lord? Some of us might think it means I walk up and down the street with my hands held high, left and right, like I'm just praising the Lord. Or it can look like how Joseph goes about life. I'm not saying don't go praise the Lord. I love that. And a good worship song as you're driving down the road is pretty awesome. Some people probably think you're crazy when you're like, I'm 2 hands off the wheel. And then some of you are like, yeah, but my vehicle's autonomous these days, baby. So sometime later, Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and chief baker offended the royal master. So there's these two individuals, very prominent individuals within the Egyptian society. Remember, Joseph is in Egypt. And so while he's there, Pharaoh's chief cupbearer. Now the cupbearer, his role was to drink Pharaoh's drink before Pharaoh drank it. And the idea was he basically was taking one for the team. If there was poison or something bad in the cup, he was going to drink it, he was going to die, and Pharaoh would be saved because of it. So this is a prominent role. I mean, think about it. You're like Pharaoh's bodyguard, right? The other one is the chief baker. We all like good baked things, like especially baked bread. Now imagine being in charge of the food, the baking for Pharaoh's household, all the events, all the things taking place. These are big deals, right? Like they're not like small jobs. But for some reason they offended Pharaoh because verse 2 says Pharaoh became angry with these two officials and he put them in prison where Joseph was in the place of the captain of the guard. Basically, if Pharaoh gets mad, you're screwed. That's what I read out of it. So he put them in prison where Joseph was, in the palace of the captain of the guard. And they remained in prison for quite some time. And the captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, who looked after them. Again, it says, for some time. So I think it's safe to say Joseph has been in prison for years. This isn't just a moment. This isn't just a slap on the wrist. This is time where he is sitting there asking time and time again, why am I here? But he's using this for a purpose. Because while they were in prison, Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker each had dreams one night. And each dream had its own meaning. Now, are you with me on verse 6? It says what? When Joseph saw them the next morning, I want you to notice these next words. It says what? He noticed. He noticed something about them. And he noticed that they were upset. It's important because when we are in a crummy situation, Joseph's in a pretty crummy situation. Wouldn't you say that? He's in prison. And he's not only in prison, he's in prison in a foreign land. And so here he is in prison in a crummy situation, and he has two options, just like you and I have two options in a crummy situation. One, we can complain about it. Oh, this stinks. And I think misery loves company. So then we find people who are like, yeah, that stinks. And we just build the complaining about it. That's option one. Or option two is we can make something of it. We can actually do something, even though we're in a crummy situation, we can make something of it. I've learned in my short life that complaining gets me nowhere, but to find people to complain with. Actually doing something actually gets me out of it, right? And so here, Joseph has a choice, and he chooses to do something with it. As he's going in and out of his daily routine, as being in this prison, what he does is he notices something about these individuals, and he notices them in that something is wrong in their life. Now, there's a reason that there's this importance to the cupbearer and the baker. So it's important that we understand he notices them, okay? But he notices both of them. And what is about to happen is he's about to interpret their dreams. And as he interprets their dreams, they're going to come true to interpretation. So having two is really important because it actually is signifying that this isn't like a one coincidence moment. Having two separate dreams with two separate outcomes that come true actually will give substantiation to Joseph and what he did, right? Okay, so that's why there's two in there. One goes favorably and one goes unfavorably. So we have that, but then it says to us that the two cupbearers replied to him, and this is what it says in verse 8. We both had dreams last night, but no one can tell us what they mean. And so now they're in this situation where he notices that something's wrong. He asks what's going on with them, and then they tell him why. Let me go back to the noticing. Have you ever found that as Americans, especially in our culture, and you ask someone from a different culture, they'll say, you Americans are weird because of this. We always introduce ourselves or say hi to someone with, what's up? How are you doing? How's it going? Do we ever actually mean it? Give you an example. I was at the grocery store the other day, and I try to be the one that goes to the actual line with a cashier versus the machine, partly because I want to interact with that individual, but then the other part is the machines drive me nuts. You did not scan your item. You did not scan your item, and then you're waiting on help forever. Ever been there? And then there's a line of people, and you're like, it's not me, it's the machine. So I go to this individual, and I ask her the question. I said, how are you? Now, when I ask that question, if I'm being honest, I'm not really expecting an answer. And so she says, my day stinks. And I stood there frozen. Like, what do I say? It's one thing to notice, it's another thing to actually notice. Joseph actually notices them. He hears their answer, and their answer is, we had these dreams last night, but no one can tell us what they mean. Now, as the cupbearer and as the chief baker, they were well-to-do people in the Egyptian culture, meaning they had a lot of resources, and they could have access to the greatest technologies of their day. Now, what was the greatest technology of their day? Dream interpreters. And these dream interpreters and magicians and people in their culture would actually help them understand what their dreams were telling them about their future. And so they would go to them, and they had this thing called a dream book, and they would be able to have a professional class that would tell you, like professional class of people, that would tell you what your dreams meant. And so they would dig through it, and they would say, well, your dream means this or that. Well, they're in prison. Do they have any dream interpreters? No. And so they're upset, they're frustrated, likely because, well, if they were out of prison, they'd have all the resources to find what they need. Here they have no resources, and they don't know where to turn. Let's make this more 2026. We live in a culture that I would argue is more and more increasingly secular than it is Christian. Right? I have a son playing baseball today, and Jessica, my wife, said, man, they're going to call the elders on me because I have too many baseball games on a Sunday morning to get the kids to. It was a joke, okay, so don't worry. But here's the point. When I grew up not too long ago, Sunday baseball was not a huge thing in the morning. It would often be the afternoon, not 8 a.m., 9 a.m., whatever it is. And that's one small example of how we've moved more and more into less and less priority of church. Let me go even further. According to a Pew Research study, 92% of Americans will call themselves spiritual. In other words, they believe that there is a power greater than themselves. They believe in the existence of the soul, and they agree in eternity. Okay? That same research would say that 25% of people say they go to church on a weekly basis. Okay, you with me? 25% say they go to church on a weekly basis. Now that we live in the cell phone era, there's something on our devices that tracks every move. And did you know that studies and statisticians actually have access to that? That's why you get all the cookie notifications. Do you allow it? Do you not allow it, right? According to cell phone data, 3% of Americans go to church on a regular basis. So congratulations, you're a part of the 3%. Now, why does that matter? Because I think as a society, we've moved more and more and more away from actually a true source being Jesus Christ and being with a body of believers who can actually notice us and what's going on. And we've gone more and more into this new age understanding of spirituality. I can't tell you how many people say to me, man, the energy is so good here. I'm like, what do you mean? Or the crystals that people are into, or how many people I know, believe it or not, with Ouija board or tarot cards. This is a reality in our culture, and the more you get to know your neighbors, the more you get to know those around you, the more you see these things exist. And likely you've seen them, if you're being honest, or experienced them, or heard people talk about them. And so this is one of those things that we've grown more and more secular. So why am I using all the time on this? Because here's Joseph. And Joseph is in prison, and Joseph is in Egypt. But catch this about Joseph. He is the only Israelite, the only Hebrew in Egypt. I think it's safe to say, because of the way the family has developed, where we are in Genesis, this great, powerful nation of Egypt has one Hebrew that we know of, and who is it? Joseph. Imagine being the one light amidst all of that darkness. Church, we are coming to a place where we are going to be Joseph. More and more and more, we have the opportunity to be that one light in the darkness. So the question becomes, what do you do with it? Well, they said, we had these dreams, and no one can tell us what to do with it. So what does Joseph do? He brings God into the equation. Look at what verse 8 says. Interpreting dreams is God's business. In other words, he says, I can't give you an answer because of what I can do, Joseph, but I can bring my God into this situation and he can give you an answer. You're used to a society that can give you dream interpreters and magicians and people who are going to give you answers. I don't go to them. I go to the one true God. I'm going to bring him into the equation. He says, look, interpreting dreams is God's business. I can help you out, but only if I bring God into this moment. Joseph's ability to interpret the dreams came from and was credited to the God he followed, period. So in our life, as we go about things, how easy is it to say, look what I did, versus let me bring my God into this moment. Galatians 5:25 says, since we are living by the Spirit, let us follow the Spirit's leading in every part of our lives. Today is like confessional for the pastor, because I got a confession to make. I used to laugh at bringing God into small decisions. Like, should I really pray about what color car to get? Should I really pray about that little detail? And I kind of was like, it doesn't matter. Like, God doesn't care. And then I couldn't find a car that was affordable. And so all of a sudden, I started bringing God into the equation. I said, Lord, make it clear, like help guide, help make this, like out of that desperation. Have you ever been to that place and finally desperation? And then God provided in a way that I found a car that was under budget, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And so here's what I learned. God does care about the small details. And he wants you to go with everything. Are you bringing God into the equation? I even gave the salesperson a little mini Jesus and said, hey, he brought this into being. So my point is, in all things, we're to bring God to it. Are we doing it? But as we do it, we see that he interprets these dreams, and he's willing to say the good and the bad. Clearly, as you kind of skim through it, and I encourage you to read through it, Joseph says, look, Mr. Cupbearer, it's going to go well for you. You're going to be restored back to your position. You're going to actually get all the things that you lost. Bravo. Hey, Mr. Chief Baker, you're going to be impaled on a pole. Like, you're going to die. Like, he has to deliver both scenarios. And he does it. He doesn't back down. He says what has to be said, what God had revealed, no matter what it meant. And so, church, I think the simple thing for us to think about there is, are we willing to follow the Spirit to the yes and to the no? Are we willing to follow God's leading in all circumstances? It's easy to share the good news, but we also have to be willing to share the hard news, the tough news, because God will use both of those circumstances. So he glorifies God. He praises God. He says God can interpret the dreams. He interprets them for him. One's favorable, one's unfavorable. But as we follow this chief cupbearer, or the cupbearer, is going to be really important. And so what we see, especially in Genesis 40, verses 14 and 15, is this. Glorifying God often means for being forgotten by man. You can glorify God, and it doesn't mean man remembers. It doesn't mean man fulfills what he said he would do. Look at Joseph's request in verse 14 and 15. Please remember me and do me a favor when things go well for you. Mention me to Pharaoh so he might let me out of this place. He's like, dude, can you just, when you get out of here, tell Pharaoh who let you out? But he does something else that I find really interesting, and it's verse 15. He says, for I was kidnapped from my homeland, the land of the Hebrews, and now I am here in prison, but I did nothing to deserve it. I sat on this for a little bit because there's a moment where we see his character shining again. He never throws his family under the bus. He doesn't say, my brother sold me as a slave. He doesn't say, my family's crummy, they hate me. He says, I was kidnapped because he was taken by the midnight traders out of the well. And he's like, look, they took me. He doesn't blame his own family because he doesn't want to cast a negative light on what God is doing through them. How easy would it have been for him to say, man, I have the worst brothers in the world. They put me here. But instead, He's salvaging the image for a reason. We go through the end of the chapter and we see that Pharaoh's chief cupbearer, it's verse 23. It says, Pharaoh's chief cupbearer, however, did what? Come on. I'm making sure you're awake. Forgot all about Joseph, never giving him another thought. Can you imagine? All of this comes true, all of this takes place, and he's completely forgotten about. So then, the next chapter, it says, 2 full years later. You can't just look at this and be like, man, Joseph had it easy. Gosh, for 2 years he was probably pacing, wondering, did he tell Pharaoh? Did he not tell Pharaoh? Did he tell Pharaoh? Did he not tell Pharaoh? No news, no news, no news. His beard's getting longer and longer, and suddenly he's like, look, I don't know if the beard's really getting longer, but it's going to say he shaved, so I'm just assuming. And all of a sudden, he's like, I've been stuck here. I've been in this place, and he's completely forgotten about me. There was an opportunity that came, and the opportunity came because of what God could do and not what man could do. It wasn't because it was his plan. Hey, I'm going to interpret this dream, and then the chief cupbearer, he's going to go and tell Pharaoh. That never came true. What happens is Pharaoh has a dream. And in verse 8, it says, the next morning Pharaoh was very disturbed by the dream. I'm in chapter 41, verse 8. So he called for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. And when Pharaoh told them his dreams, not one of them could tell him what they meant. In other words, Pharaoh has this disturbing dream. It bugs him. And he says, I need to call all the professionals. And he calls all these professionals, and the professionals fail him. They're not able to give him the insight and the wisdom that he is looking for. Church, I think our Joseph moment is coming more and more in our culture as a church because people have quicker and quicker access to answers than we've ever had before. I'll never forget in elementary school, I went to edfrom.com. That led me to a page called Google. And then on Google, I could then find things. Then suddenly, as you get older, Google becomes your homepage browser, and you can Google anything. And now, I listen to my kids have full-on conversations with Alexa about things in life. And over, Alexa is just way off base, but they do, and they're having these full-on conversations, and it freaks me out. And I've been on this whole kind of study of AI, and I'm not going to go down that road. But here's the thing, AI is not going anywhere. It's coming into our life more and more. And there's positives of it. I'm not going to sit here and say it's all negative, but here's the opportunity for the church. There are things that are outside the algorithm that only the church has the answer to. There are things that people are going to come to the place where they're going to ask, what is truth? What does it mean to be human? What does it actually mean to have to discover these things? And the only one who will be ready for that is the one with the one truth, and that's the church. No one else will have that answer. And I believe the golden age is coming because if you want to call it that, because we're going to have the opportunity to be the light in the darkness. We're going to be able to show hope when the algorithm failed. Pharaoh told his dreams, but could anyone of the greatest resources at the time and the greatest superpower of the nations of the world give him an answer? And the answer is no. So finally, verse 9, the king's chief cupbearer spoke up, and he says, today I have been reminded of my failure. Verse 10 continues, where it says, some time ago you were angry, and the chief baker and me, and you imprisoned us in the palace and the captain guard. And one night the chief baker and I each had a dream, and each dream had its own meaning, and there was a young Hebrew man. Did you catch that? There was a young what? Hebrew man. He identified him as there was this foreign guy who was in prison. He was identified as a Hebrew, and he was a slave of the captain of the guard, and we told him our dreams, and he told us what each of our dreams meant, and everything happened just as he had predicted. I was restored to my position as a cupbearer, and the chief baker was executed and impaled on a pole And Pharaoh sent for Joseph at once, and he was quickly brought from the prison. After he shaved, that's why I said the beard thing, and changed his clothes, he went in and stood before Pharaoh. All of a sudden, he has an opportunity. And he has an opportunity to stand before the leader of the most powerful nation in the world. Think about that. As a Hebrew, the one light in all of this. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had dreamed last night, but no one here can tell me what it means. But I have heard that when you hear about a dream, you can interpret it. This would be his moment. Well, Mr. President, I can. I've got all the skills in the world. I can do anything you like. Is that how he responds? No. He says this, it is beyond my power to do this, but God can tell you what it means and set you at ease. Suddenly, he says, let me bring my God into the equation. It's not about me, it's about what God can do. In church, let me ask you, are we bringing God into the circumstance? Or are we saying, look what I can do? Bringing him into the circumstance is the only way to get to the true answer, but it takes that understanding. So, what does this mean for you and I? Well, I think it means this, simply put. Increased obedience leads to increased opportunity. Increased obedience to the Lord and what he calls you to do and responding to what he calls you to do and bringing him into the situation leads to increased opportunity. Jump with me to verse 37 and following. We have to flip a page, so that shows you how fast we're breezing through it. Joseph's suggestions were well received by Pharaoh and his officials, so Pharaoh asked his officials, can we find anyone else like this man, so obviously filled with the Spirit of God? What is he noticing about him? He has a connection with God that is unlike anyone else. They're in a world with all these gods, and suddenly he's like, who has this connection with this God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has revealed the meaning of the dreams to you, clearly no one else is as intelligent or wise as you are. Well, when you bring God into the equation, you get a lot more wisdom. Have you ever noticed that? So he says, you will be in charge of my court, and all my people will take orders from you. Only I, sitting on my throne, will have a rank higher than yours. This is insane. He went from dad's favorite kid with the robe to the bottom of a well. From the bottom of a well to number 2 in charge of a palace. From number 2 in charge of a palace to a prison cell. And now from a prison cell to number 2 in charge of the most powerful nation at its time. All as a Hebrew man. God will do incredibly more with an obedient life than you could ever think or imagine. But he's not bringing glory to Joseph, is he? He's bringing God into it time and time again. It wasn't Joseph's looks, it wasn't his intelligence. It was his connection with God that differentiated him from everyone else. So hear me out, please. The more we try to look like the world, the less we can stand out for God. God is not calling you to look like everyone else. He's calling you to look like his child. And he's calling you to live like his child. He's calling you to be a part of his family in such a way that causes you to stand out so you can be the light into these dark circumstances around us. Verse 41 says that Joseph said, I hereby put you in charge of the entire land of Egypt. And this is where it gets even better. Verse 45 says, Pharaoh gave Joseph a new Egyptian name. And I'm going to botch it, but it's Zaphenath-Paneah, I don't know Egyptian. And he also gave him a wife, and she was the daughter of the priest. So Joseph took charge of the entire land of Egypt. Now, a lot of study has gone into this name. In the Hebrew name, if we take it out of Hebrew, it means something different. But it's not a Hebrew name, is it? And it's an Egyptian name. It's a name that was given by Pharaoh. And when name changes happen, they have meaning because the name change says he saw something about it. And do you know what this name actually means in Egyptian? And every scholar, secular or Christian or Jewish, however you want to look at it, every scholar will agree that this is the Egyptian name. Are you ready for it? God speaks and lives. His name is signified by the God he believes in the God who not only speaks, but also lives. We're talking a Genesis God, not a New Testament God. God lived and was active then, and he lives and he's active now. We don't have a God that's absent. We have a God who is present. And Joseph's life glorified him in such a way that even Pharaoh says, man, this God speaks, and he lives. So let me ask you, what identifies you? Is it a title? Is it a circumstance? Because no matter what, I pray that it is the Lord who identifies us. I had the opportunity to go on my first ever field trip. I don't go on field trips very often because getting stuck on a bus, my legs don't fit. It's very tough and it's annoying. But my kids want me to go on the field trip sometimes, so I went on my very first one, and the only reason I went is it was a Tigers game. And it was a Tigers game that was during the day, and so they did this whole weather thing that no one paid attention to. And we had to get there crazy early for a 1 o'clock game. And as we're there, we got to watch batting practice and all that take place after. And of course, this is no offense to the Tigers. They wanted nothing to do with the kids. A few said hi. But mainly the visiting team, the Los Angeles Angels, wanted to interact with the kids. So I take Jacob down to the field, and we get some autographs. It was pretty cool, right? Like he has this experience. And so I see this guy, and I don't know, when I'll be honest, like, I don't know who these players are, so I'm Google searching, like, for their name, right? But there's this guy, and I notice his shirt, and I yell at him. And he comes over, and he takes a picture with Jacob. So he gave him an autograph, took a picture. Do you notice what his shirt says? Jesus won. And I said to him, hey, I love your shirt. And we start talking. I go on to research who this is. This is Brent Sutter. And as I dug in, he has played 373 career MLB games. That's not a short career. He's pitched 635 innings with a career 3.63 ERA. That's pretty good statistics for a baseball player. But here's what's even better that I didn't know about him. Last year, he won the 2025 Marvin Miller Man of the Year Award, which means of all the players in Major League Baseball, they said he has the highest character and gives the most back to the community that he's a part of. Talk about an awesome award, right? So then as I did that, as I'm talking to him, I said, I love your shirt. And you know what his response was to me? Nothing matters more than Jesus. And I want to glorify him in everything that I do. Church, it's not about the uniform. It's about the Jesus and the Lord that we get to magnify. And whatever your stage is, whether it be an MLB field or it be in the office, are we glorifying the Lord in everything that we do? Because Jesus won, and that's what matters. So let me end with this. What is the chief end of man? Man's chief end is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. So go and enjoy God this week and bring glory to his name. Will you pray with me?